The gunshot cracked through the Montana night like a bone-breaking. Becca Stone stood on her porch, the old Winchester trembling in her hands as 20 leather-clad riders crowded her gate, their motorcycles forming a wall of chrome and steel against the blizzard. One warning shot into the sky, the next would find flesh. 20 feet of snow separated her from the strangers, 20 feet between safety and whatever darkness these men carried. But sometimes, survival hangs on a single decision, and Becca Stone was about to make hers. The lead rider stepped forward, massive hands raised peacefully. Snow gathered on his broad shoulders as he called through the wind. "We mean no trouble, miss. Just shelter from the storm. Our convoy got separated. We have injured men." Becca adjusted her grip on the rifle that had belonged to her grandfather, just like this land, just like everything she was about to lose. "There's a town 15 miles south," she replied, though they all knew 15 miles in this blizzard might as well be 1,000. The man took another step forward. In the porch light, she caught a glimpse of something hanging from his neck, a pendant shaped like a diving hawk with spread wings. Her breath caught. The same symbol she'd found in her grandfather's lockbox just days ago, alongside medals he'd never displayed and a journal he'd never shared. "Your grandfather was William Stone," the man said. Not a question. The captain. Time crystallized in the cold air. The pendant, the knowing voice, the way he said captain with reverence, it all connected to secrets her grandfather had carried to his grave 3 weeks ago. A real man never turns away someone who needs help. Becca, no matter who they are. His voice echoed in her memory. With a deep breath that clouded before her face, Becca Stone made her decision. She lowered the Winchester and stepped aside. "Get your men into the barn. Quickly." Ildun Hawk's Rest Ranch had stood on the same Montana soil since shortly after the Civil War. 5 generations of Stone men had worked this land, defended it, passed it down. Now it belonged to Becca, all 400 acres from the weathered ranch house to the sprawling barn to the hawk-shaped ridge that gave the property its name. In the weak morning light following the storm, Becca watched the bikers who'd spent the night in her barn. They moved with military precision, checking their motorcycles, stretching cold muscles. Contrary to her expectations, they'd been respectful, accepting her blankets and coffee with surprising gratitude. The man with the pendant had introduced himself as Steel Jack Morrison, though the others called him simply Steel. He was older than she'd initially thought, early 60s, with a face weathered by years on the road and what looked like old scars from forgotten battles. A knock came at the door. Becca opened it to find Steele and a younger man waiting. "Miss Stone," Steele said, removing his cap, "we wanted to thank you properly for your hospitality." Up close in daylight, she could see the weight he carried, not just years, but memories. His companion was younger, perhaps mid-20s, with an engineer's precise hands stained with oil. "You knew my grandfather," Becca said. Not a question. Steele nodded. "From Korea. When I saw the Hawk's Rest sign, I hoped." He glanced around. "Is the captain here?" The weight of grief, still fresh after 3 weeks, pressed against her chest. "Grandfather passed away last month. Heart attack." Steele removed his cap completely, holding it against his chest. "I'm sorry to hear that. He was a good man, one of the best." "You'd better come in," Becca said, stepping back from the door. 3 weeks earlier, Becca had stood in the same kitchen, watching men in dark suits load her grandfather's casket into a hearse. There had been no formal military funeral, no honor guard, none of the recognition that should have accompanied a decorated war hero's passing. William Stone had been buried quietly in the small plot behind the house. Now she led Steele and the younger man, "Danny," he'd said, to the kitchen table. Coffee steamed between them as Steele continued. "I should have found him sooner. We all should have. Your grandfather saved my life in Korea, 1951. Carried me 2 miles through enemy territory after I took shrapnel." Becca blinked. Her grandfather had rarely spoken about the war, never mentioned heroics or friends made in battle. "He never talked about it." "He wouldn't have," Steele agreed. "But others talked." "The Nighthawks, that's what they called our unit. Special operations. Your grandfather was our medic, but he was so much more." Becca thought of the locked box she'd found while going through her grandfather's things. The box containing medals she'd never seen him wear, citations for bravery she'd never heard him mention, and a leather journal she hadn't yet found the courage to read. "Why are you here now?" she asked. "After all these years?" Steele's weathered face showed shame. "I've been looking for him for a long time." "But your grandfather, he disappeared after the war, changed his name, came back here. I only found out he was still alive a few months ago." Becca processed this slowly. William Stone, the quiet man who'd raised her after her parents' accident, had been running from something. "I think you'd better tell me everything." The small town of Pine Valley had changed dramatically in the 15 years since Becca had moved there to live with her grandfather. Once a tight-knit farming community, it had gradually transformed as developers discovered its picturesque mountain setting. Old family businesses had closed, replaced by boutiques and coffee shops catering to wealthy tourists. From the town's pharmacy, Becca could see these changes clearly as she collected her grandfather's final prescription, heart medication that had arrived too late. Across the street, what had once been the hardware store was now an artisanal shop. "Becca Stone," a voice called. She turned to find Vincent Walsh approaching, his expensive suit out of place among the casual winter clothes of the locals. At 38, Vincent had returned to Pine Valley last year to take over his father's bank after getting an MBA from Harvard. "Vincent," she acknowledged coolly. "I was hoping to discuss your grandfather's loan," he said, flashing a practiced smile. "I'm afraid there's been a complication." Becca tensed. The substantial loan her grandfather had taken to modernize equipment was now her burden. With his sudden death, the balance had come due, and the modest insurance had barely covered funeral expenses. "What kind of complication?" "There was a clause regarding change of ownership," Vincent explained. "In the event of your grandfather's death, the terms revert to accelerated repayment, $250,000 due in full within 60 days. 60 days, she repeated, blood running cold. "However," Vincent continued smoothly, "I have investors interested in the Hawks Rest property. We could offer you $300,000, enough to clear the debt and give you a fresh start." "The ranch is not for sale," Becca said firmly. Vincent's smile faltered. "Don't be foolish. Your grandfather is gone. That land is just dirt and memories now. To you, maybe. To me, it's home." As she walked away, Becca felt his calculating gaze. She had 60 days to save her grandfather's legacy, and no idea how. Back at the ranch, Becca led Steele and Danny to her grandfather's study. The room was unchanged since his death. Books lining the walls, his worn chair, the desk where he'd taught her to write her name. She pulled a metal lockbox from the bottom drawer. Inside lay artifacts of a life her grandfather had never shared. A Purple Heart, a Distinguished Service Cross, photographs of young men in uniform, and beneath them all, a leather journal and a silver pendant identical to the one Steele wore. "The Nighthawks," Steele breathed, picking up the pendant reverently. "I haven't seen one of these in decades." Becca lifted the journal, its leather cover soft with age. She opened to the first page, her grandfather's precise handwriting filling the yellowed paper. "Today, I killed a man for the first time, not in battle where death is anonymous but up close. Captain says I'll get used to it. God help me if that's true." She closed the journal, uncertain. This was a side of her grandfather she'd never known. He was different when he came back, Steele said softly. We all were. But your grandfather carried more than most. Her fingers found something else in the box. An envelope addressed simply, "In case of need." Inside was $5,000 in cash and a note. Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found what I kept hidden. If trouble comes, look for the men who wear the diving hawk. The Brotherhood will honor its debt to me. She looked up at Steele. He knew you might come someday. Steele nodded slowly. The Brotherhood spans all 50 states now. We're mostly veterans, men who found it hard to fit back into normal society. We look out for each other, and we never forget a debt. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted them. Through the window, Becca saw a police cruiser approaching. Sheriff Dale Mitchell sat behind the wheel, his expression hard even at distance. What aren't you telling me? Becca demanded. The Brotherhood has been investigating corruption, Steele said carefully. Land grabs, foreclosures, forced sales across 3 states. Pine Valley is part of this pattern, and my grandfather might have known something, Becca realized. Danny nodded. That bank loan, it's part of their operation. A knock at the door, firm and authoritative. Miss Stone, Sheriff Mitchell called, need to have a word about your visitors. Steele gave an almost imperceptible nod. Whatever happens, he murmured, remember, you're not alone anymore. Sheriff Mitchell had served Pine Valley for 20 years, but something had changed in recent months. His easy smile had hardened, his friendliness replaced by watchful distance. Morning, Becca, he said, hand resting near his holster. Heard you had unexpected guests. Small town, she replied, not inviting him in. Mitchell stepped inside anyway, eyes finding Steele and Danny. Gentlemen, passing through. Storm caught us, Steele replied evenly. Miss Stone offered shelter. Well, storm's passed. I'm sure you'll be moving on. Actually, Becca interjected, they're staying to help with repairs. Storm damaged the barn roof. Mitchell's eyes narrowed. That's so? Well, just so you know, Vincent Walsh mentioned he'd be stopping by today. Might want to clean up before he arrives. The threat hung in the air as he turned to leave. Your grandfather was respected in this town. Would be a shame to see that respect diminished. After the cruiser disappeared, Becca turned to Steele. What exactly have you gotten me into? It's more what you were already involved in, Steele replied grimly. Your grandfather's death. Was it really a heart attack? The implication stole her breath. What are you saying? The captain was investigating something before he died. Something about the bank, about land deals in Pine Valley. He contacted an old friend 3 months ago, said he'd found evidence of fraud. Danny stepped forward. Miss Stone, the bank that holds your loan has foreclosed on 15 family farms in 3 counties over the past 2 years. All were subsequently sold to the same development company, Mountain Vista Ventures. And Vincent Walsh is involved with Mountain Vista, Steele added. Becca sank into a chair. My grandfather's loan wasn't due for another 5 years. Convenient timing, Steele observed darkly. Are you suggesting my grandfather was murdered? Before Steele could answer, the sound of motorcycles filled the air. Not the familiar rumble returning, but new engines approaching. Through the window, they could see a line of bikes cresting the hill. 20, 30, maybe more. The Brotherhood, Danny explained. We sent word. Steele's weathered face was grim. If they're willing to kill for this land, they won't stop with your grandfather. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as more riders arrived. They came in groups of 3 or 4, their motorcycles forming defensive positions around the ranch. Becca counted over 50 by evening, all bearing the diving hawk emblem. In the barn, they'd established a communications center, A massive rider introduced himself as Rex Thunder Williams, the Brotherhood's regional commander. His silver beard flowed over a leather vest adorned with military patches. "Miss Stone," he said formally, "the Nighthawks don't forget their debts. Your grandfather saved many lives, including Steele's. We're here to protect his legacy." That evening, they found the evidence. In her grandfather's workshop, hidden in a false bottom of an old toolbox, was a digital recorder. When Becca pressed play, her grandfather's voice filled the small space. "This is William Stone, October 12th, meeting with Robert Walsh regarding loan discrepancies. Robert, these accusations are serious." A second voice joined, older, more polished than Vincent's. "William, if what you're saying is true..." "It's all here, Robert. Forged signatures, altered terms. 12 families lost their farms because of doctored paperwork. Your son's company bought the land each time at fractions of their worth. Vincent wouldn't..." Robert's voice faltered. "Look at the dates. Look at the pattern. And now my loan documents have been altered too." Heavy silence then. "What do you need from me?" "Access to the original files. Proof that my loan was for 50,000, not 250. Someone changed the terms after I signed. Meet me at the bank tomorrow night. I'll have the files ready." The recording ended. Becca stared at the device. Grandfather died the next day, and Robert Walsh died a week later. "Both heart attacks," Steele said grimly. "Too convenient to be coincidence." The next morning brought Vincent Walsh and trouble. 3 police cruisers arrived with him, lights flashing. Sheriff Mitchell emerged first, followed by 4 deputies, hands near their weapons. Thunder stepped forward as their spokesman. "Private property, Sheriff. We're here at the owner's invitation." "The owner is in default," Mitchell countered. "County has assumed jurisdiction." Vincent climbed from his expensive car, furious. "I thought I was clear about the timeline," he snapped at the sheriff. "Execute the order now." "This is still a legal proceeding," Becca said, stepping between them. "You have no authority here." Vincent's smile was cold. "You'd be surprised what authority I have." Behind him, unmarked vehicles arrived. Men in tactical gear emerged, carrying military-grade weapons. These weren't local deputies. The situation was deteriorating until a new sound emerged, the thunder of many motorcycles. Dozens, then hundreds coming up the mountain road. The Brotherhood had arrived in force. Thunder's radio crackled. "All units, this is base. Full mobilization authorized. Protect the Stone Ranch at all costs." The standoff lasted hours. Vincent's private security faced off against 200 Brotherhood members, veterans who'd served in every conflict since Vietnam. Lawyers arrived, media vans appeared on distant hills, and state police cordoned off the area. Finally, a helicopter landed in the ranch yard. From it emerged a woman in a federal agent's jacket, Attorney General Patricia Reynolds herself. "Mr. Walsh," she announced, "you're under arrest for bank fraud, conspiracy, and the murders of William Stone and Robert Walsh." Vincent's face went white. "You can't prove anything." Reynolds held up a USB drive. "Your grandfather was thorough, Miss Stone. Bank security footage shows you entering the building the night your father died, Mr. Walsh. He never left alive." As handcuffs clicked around Vincent's wrists, Reynolds turned to Becca. "We found the mineral survey reports in your grandfather's files. Rare earth deposits worth billions. That's what this was really about." "The land," Becca breathed. "Your grandfather discovered the minerals by accident, bought additional acreage to protect them. When Walsh's development company couldn't acquire the land legitimately, they turned to fraud and murder." Sheriff Mitchell was led away in handcuffs alongside Vincent. The corrupt judge who'd approved the foreclosures resigned in disgrace. The private security team faced federal weapons charges. Months later, Hawk's Rest Ranch had transformed. The barn housed a veterans retreat program. The fields yielded crops, tended by Brotherhood members seeking peace. The mineral deposits remained untouched, protected by legislation bearing William Stone's name. Becca stood on the porch each evening, watching Brotherhood members share stories and laughter. She wore a leather jacket now, smaller than the others, but bearing the same diving hawk patch. Thunder had presented it formally. First female member in our history. The captain's daughter in all but blood. Vincent Walsh received life in prison for murder. His development empire crumbled. The illegally acquired lands returned to their rightful owners. The families who'd lost their farms received compensation, though some wounds never fully heal. Each night, Becca touched the diving hawk emblem and remembered her grandfather's words. "The Brotherhood will honor its debt to me." He'd been right. In saving his legacy, she'd found a new family, one forged in battle, bound by honor, dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Hawk's Rest Ranch was no longer just a place where buildings passed from generation to generation. It had become something more, a sanctuary, a brotherhood, a legacy of honor that would endure long after those who established it had ridden their final mile. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all.